The last game we're talking about, another ACC game, is the only other ranked game that we have this week besides Penn State, Ohio State. Number 18 Pitt at number 20 SMU, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on ACC Network. These are two schools, Dawn, looking to stay alive in the ACC championship race right now. So a lot of people look at the ACC and say, oh, it's going to come down to Miami and Clemson. These two are still looming very large right now. Both Pitt and SMU, like Miami and Clemson, are undefeated in conference play so far this year. Pitt is undefeated overall with a perfect 7-0 record. The winner of this game firmly establishes himself as a top contender to win the conference alongside Miami and Clemson. The loser of this game is going to have a lot of trouble getting back into the title hunt for this conference. So massive game to really establish, okay, who will be the big three of the ACC, Miami, Clemson, and which one of these two schools?
No, absolutely. It's a huge matchup that I don't know that we anticipated. And I think for SMU it's very interesting because if they win this game, they've got at least something of a clear road possibly to maybe get to the conference title game or however the tiebreakers might work if we end up with some sort of scenario with Miami and Clemson there. But no, this is a massive game now because you're talking about Clemson, Miami, and these two teams as being really the four contenders to get into the ACC title game.
Absolutely. So, Don, you have the SMU offense who had a lot of difficulties against Duke last week. 6 turnovers. I believe the stat was it's only the second time out of 126 times where teams lost the turnover battle by 6 and still won the game. SMU is one of 2 schools ever accomplished that. So what happened there, and what should we be looking out for when Kevin Jennings hit the ball?
So what happened there was Manny Diaz, even though he's a high blitzing type of coach, decided not to blitz Kevin Jennings because Jennings doesn't like throwing into standard coverages against standard rushes. He would rather break the pocket and do a lot of the things out of the pocket with his athleticism. But I think for me, SMU, they were bad last week. There's no question they got away with a win with 6 turnovers. Yeah. For me, I think the big story is actually this Pitt defense and what they did to Kyle McCord last week. I know you don't want me to bring it up, but
yeah, please don't.
But Pitt's defense kind of made Syracuse's offense do the same thing as SMU. The difference was they stayed in their wheelhouse and kept blitzing and kept running things the way that Pat Narduzzi's always run them. He's always run this kind of 4-match coverage and quarters coverage it's a weird version of it. So here's the 3 things that Pitt's defense does. Okay, let's get a reminder here, a crash course on Pat Narduzzi. Okay, they run quarters at the highest rate in the Power 5. Okay, normally you would think that, and you go, okay, it's cover 4, the sitting guy's back, and it's conservative, and we're just not trying to give up home runs. Not at all. He's daring you to take those shots. They have the highest press coverage rate in the entire country. All right? Over 93% of their plays, you will see some sort of press coverage. All right? And then the 14th highest pass blitz rate, even though you wouldn't think, okay, this is a team that runs a lot of quarters. They're not going to blitz a lot because they don't have the guys to do it. They do it anyway, right? It's always what's made Pat Narduzzi weird, right? When he was at Michigan State, now he's been at Pitt forever. And it throws off teams because it makes you take shots down the field quicker than you really want to, right? It's kind of this weird thing where you feel almost forced as a quarterback when you see one-on-ones outside or if you see blitzers coming and they just leave the seam sitting wide open, but you also don't have that much time to do it because you're talking about extra guys coming and he runs all sorts of twists and different things and guys might be coming off the slot and who knows. You're having to recognize first and foremost who's coming and where the space is, or you're just taking that gamble outside against a corner that's pressed. A lot of times on the weak side of the formation, it can be kind of a weird thing where it looks like zone to the strong side where there's more receiving threats, and then kind of one backside man. There's other teams that do this too. Tulane runs, actually, I don't know if they do it anymore without Willie Fritz there, but that's something that they would run down there the last couple of years. It's a weird defense that makes you kind of think a little more than usual. Now, if you can hit those shots and hit those explosives, you're going to be okay. So let's just compare this to what we have with Kevin Jennings, okay, in those 3 things. And you've got, against quarters, okay, a 66.8 passing grade, which is 12 points lower than he has against all other coverages, right? Kevin Jennings wants to make those big plays in the passing game. Sometimes those too high coverages like that don't allow you to do that, all right? Now, the blitz thing is interesting because he's still the 4th best passer in the country against the blitz, and Manny Diaz knew that last week. but he didn't blitz him.
Yep.
He decided not to. He said, we're going to sit standard, and we're going to make you make throws. And he didn't make the throws. He was thrown into tight windows, and it was a problem. So we'll see if Narduzzi now takes a page out of Diaz's book, and he's a little more conservative and makes Kevin Jennings throw the football. The third thing to me, I'm going to look out at SMU's weapons against press coverage. All right, that's a big thing this week. Only a 63.8 receiving grade against press coverage this year. And you're talking about an SMU team that doesn't have R.J. Maryland now, their tight end. I think he's the fastest tight end in college football.
Yeah, he'd be huge for those wide open seam routes.
He's the seam guy, and actually he was the highest graded guy when it came to beating press coverage. It's not a guy, I think more and more in this ACC race, it's not a guy that they could afford to lose. They've got to find some answers for Narduzzi's scheme and for the production they're losing with R.J. Maryland. You noticed it a little bit last week. I don't think it is a coincidence that they almost lost that game without R.J. Maryland. He was a big part of their offense, even though he's a tight end. He's honestly a receiver in that offense, and he was their best one. So I think there's a lot of dynamics here that Rhett Lashley has to figure out. First of all, he's got to calm down his quarterback after 6 turnovers last week, and then he's got to figure out how in the world he's beating Pat Narduzzi's defense and what the idea is going to be for that.
Yeah, that was an awesome breakdown of Pat Narduzzi's defense, because it's like when you watch it, it's like this makes no damn sense, but it's working.
That's the point.
It's really interesting watching it. And honestly, Kyle McCord was in a blender a couple weeks ago as well.
And there were times with McCord where he even made some of the right throws vertically, or at least decided to, and just missed them because it was rushed, or he just couldn't find guys on the outside separating.
They weren't getting open.
Because it's not just the scheme, too. There's good players. There's good players out there, too. It's not like Pat Narduzzi doesn't have good players, but it's a weird scheme that really makes you, when you play Pitt that week, it makes you do some different things that maybe you're not used to.
Absolutely. If you can't separate either, that's a big thing too. Syracuse's receivers, they have some solid guys that in contested situations, but not a lot of great separators. If you can't separate against them, that's a big issue. And that's another thing too. I'm not going to try to make excuses for Kyle McCord, but they didn't get a lot of separation in that game either. So that's key for SMU in this one. My matchup to watch when Pittsburgh has the ball is, can SMU force Eli Holstein to beat them? It might be Eli Holstein, by the way. We don't know. So head coach Pat Narduzzi said the team is in quote-unquote wait-and-see mode with Eli Holstein. He left the blowout win over Syracuse with an undisclosed injury. At first, so it looked like he got hit hard on the head, like his head hit the turf pretty hard. Pat Narduzzi said after the game, he got some dirt in his eye, and then we took him out after that. Then later on, he's like, it was more than just dirt in his eye. I don't know what the heck happened with Eli Holstein. Pat Narduzzi is very famous for being tight-lipped about injuries as well, so we'll never know probably what happened to Eli Holstein, which makes sense, right?
The only thing I can suspect is it looked like for a moment, there was a moment where he was waving his hand in front of his own face, like he couldn't see straight.
Yeah.
I have to assume if he hit his head on the turf, obviously, I have to think about it some sort of concussion type deal. But I get it. If they don't require you in college to release those things, and as a head coach, a lot of them don't do it.
It also makes sense because he's like, listen, is the guy's private health, like, I'm not going to disclose that. Like, he's still a kid, right? He's still a student athlete. So I actually respect that. As a media member, you want to know everything you can about these players, but also it makes sense that you don't want to disclose that kind of information. But regardless if he suits up or it's Nate Yarnell, and Pat Narduzzi even said in the press conference, Nate Yarnell will be taking first-team reps in practice. Now, again, there are a lot of the Pitt reporters like, well, what does that mean? Because Nate Yarnell always takes first-team reps in practice, even with Holstein there. So they're like, will we be taking more first-team reps or like the same amount? Like, Narduzzi's like, nope, not telling you that. Just he's taking first-team reps. Like, okay, well, now we learn nothing about this. So we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Holstein plays, maybe he doesn't. Regardless of if he does or not, SMU still should focus on forcing Pitt to win with its passing attack. The Panthers right now, they are 23rd in EPA per pass, but Dalton, you broke this down in the Syracuse preview. A good amount of luck goes into that, right? Right now, Eli Holstein has a 56 passing grade. That's the 4th worst in the Power 4 and 133rd in the country. 14 turnover-worthy plays are also tied for the third most in the Power 4. He's only thrown 6 interceptions, so he's had a lot of turnover luck this year. Pittsburgh's offensive line has had some issues protecting him as well. They have a lot of pressure on nearly 33%, nearly 1/3 of their dropbacks. That's 90th in the country. And Holstein struggles under pressure. 42.8 passing grade under pressure. Obviously, it's not a very good mark at all. SMU has the second best pressure rate in the country at 42.4%. Only Miami has a higher pressure rate than SMU, and we already talked about how elite Miami's defensive line is. So if the Mustangs are able to dominate the Panthers' struggling offensive line, stop the run game, and force Eli Holstein to beat them through the air, and his turnover luck runs out, that could spell trouble for Pitt. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, we don't know if Holstein will be the quarterback or will be Nate Yarnell, but regardless, I think the key for SMU in this game is to get after the quarterback, stop the run, and make them beat you through the air.
You know, and that point you made about the pass rush, isn't that ironic, too, that you've got Miami transfer Elijah Roberts at the head of that?
Dude, can you imagine if he's still there? Oh, my God.
I don't even know when he would play with all the guys they have there, which is probably why he went to SMU, but that's a really talented guy. You know, I love watching him, but SMU's, they've been getting it done up front. It's going to be a big mystery leading into this game. And look, I think Nate Yarnell is capable, especially if Pitt can get the run game going and get in the play action. I really liked how he worked in play action last year, but it's definitely a thing where, you know, sometimes you're good, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes a little bit of both. And I think offensively, they're doing just enough. Last week was different because they got all the turnovers and 3 pick sixes.
They didn't need to throw the ball at all.
Their defense darn near outscored their offense, or they might have. I forget what the final score was. But, I mean, you're just talking about a team that they're playing complementary football. But, yeah, SMU, this is a different challenge than they've had, I think, in the last couple of weeks. This is a good defense as well as what can be an explosive offense. So this is going to be a fun game.
Absolutely. So, Dolan, ultimately, who will join Miami and Clemson at the top of the ACC, and will Pitt continue his undefeated season, or will SMU pull off another win?
I think this is a weird game because Pat Narduzzi can absolutely coach this team and this defense to a win. I'm curious to see what Rhett Lashley has on offense for this, and if they're going to go with explosive plays early, or if it's going to be a little bit more like last week where their best plays, a lot of them really came from Brashard Smith in their run game, right? Brashard Smith's had a great year. I think what sticks out to me is SMU last week played the worst game they could have possibly played, right? You mentioned that only second win ever with a -6 turnover margin. But they won the game.
Yep.
And they got away with a tough road win against a really good defense, a defense that is at least as good and maybe even better than this Pitt defense. Now they get to go home and go, okay, we can't possibly be that bad again. I think it's a close game. I think there's some fun things here with Pitt's defense. I'm going to take SMU 31-27. I just don't think SMU's not – I mean, they can't do that like they did again last week, right? Obviously, they should have lost with the way that they played, but I think this SMU team is really good. I think they're going to figure some things out. I'm just curious what the plan is in the passing game, again, without R.J. Maryland for the rest of the season, and just how Kevin Jennings responds to what was by far his worst game of the year, because the way things have gone for SMU, too, there was a point late in last week's game I was like, we're going to see Preston Stone tonight, aren't we? We're going to go right back to it, and we're going to be back and forth with this again. But no, I think he's going to give Jennings a chance to rebound. I think he rebounds well enough to win this game, 31-27.
Yeah, I've never seen a coach, after winning a thrilling game, be more defeated in a post-game interview than Rhett Lashley.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, I don't know how we won that game. We did not deserve to win that game.
He knows they got away with it.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that was a really funny post-game interview. I also got SMU winning this one 20-20. I think, like I said, being at home is huge. They can settle down. They're in their own homes now. They're in their own dorms and apartments and in their own facilities for the week. They don't have to worry about traveling again. I think that would be big, and I just think Holstein and the Panthers, it's a banged-up Holstein. We don't know if he's going to be playing or not. Also, this is probably the best defense they played all season Pittsburgh has so far. I think Pitt will suffer their first loss of the season. And you mentioned it, Dolan. With a relatively easy remaining schedule, SMU has a great chance of winning out and going to Charlotte for the ACC title game. Now, I don't know how the tiebreakers work out if Clemson and Miami both also win out, because Clemson and Miami don't play each other, by the way. So all three of them could win out and be undefeated in conference play. And I don't know what happens then. I'll admit I don't know what happens with tiebreakers. I think it's like record against common opponents or something like that.
There's a similar scenario that in theory could happen in the Big Ten too. We could see some real chaos with all of that. But no, you're right. None of the three play each other. But SMU, look, you take care of the business in front of you. That's kind of the weird part about having these bigger conferences now. So it starts this week for SMU, and there is a road. There is a road to what they would be 11-1 at that point, right? Yeah, they only lost to BYU, so we'll see where it goes. They got some tough games in front of them, but it should be fun to watch.
It should absolutely be fun to watch. But I got SMU winning this one 28-20.